Copenhagen defeated incumbent state Senator Spencer Deary. President Trump backed Copenhagen because Deary opposed redistricting.
Deary was initially declared the victor by a margin of just 3 votes. But technical issues led the commission to throw out several ballots for both of the candidates, turning it into a 3-vote win for Copenhagen. Deary is planning to appeal that decision.
What's up, fam? We already know what time it is. We got another story that the mainstream media don't want you to know about, and they hope that it slips through the cracks while you're distracted with whatever drama they're pushing today. But we don't do that here. As always, family, we pay attention, we watch what actually matters. And right now, family, I got a story that's going to make you feel some type of way because it's one of those rare moments where the system actually works the way it's supposed to. You ever see a politician do something shady, betray the people who voted for him, and then actually face real consequences? Not a slap on the wrist, not a press conference apology. I mean, real consequences. The kind where you lose your job, your seat, your power, and your political future all at once. And that's what we're talking about today. Hit the like button right now. And if you want to see more of these kind of stories, the ones where the good guys actually win, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now let's get right into it, family, because this one is juicy. Now, here's what happened, and I'm gonna break it down in plain English so everybody can understand. We got a situation in Indiana, right? Now, Indiana, you need to understand, that's a red state. I'm talking deep red. President Trump won Indiana by massive numbers. This is not a swing state. This is not a battleground. This is solid, reliable Republican territory. But like a lot of states that are supposed to be red, you got these so-called Republicans in office who get comfortable, who forget who put them there, who start acting like they got their own agenda separate from the people they represent. And in Indiana, you had a group of state senators, 7 of them specifically, who did something that should make every single one of you angry if you care about fair elections and representation, and they voted against redistricting, as you heard in the news clip. And now, and I know that word sounds fancy, sounds like insider baseball, but let me tell you what redistricting actually means in real life. After every census, states are supposed to redraw their congressional maps to make sure each district has roughly the same number of people. But here's the thing, for years, activist judges and left wing groups were forcing states to draw districts based on race, based on all kinds of DEI criteria to create safe Democrat seats in Republican states. And they called them majority minority districts under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And what that meant in practice was that in states like Indiana, instead of having a map that fairly represented the voters, you had these weird shaped districts engineered to elect Democrats in the state that votes Republican. That's not democracy, family. That's gerrymandering. And it was being done by the courts and the left. So the Supreme Court eventually overturned the whole mess. And they said, nah, that's not how it works. And they opened the door for states like Indiana, Texas, Florida, North Carolina to redraw their maps the right way, fair maps that actually reflect how the state votes. So Indiana had a chance to clean things up. The House passed a new map. It made sense. It would have given Republicans 9 out of 9 congressional seats in a state where Trump won by huge numbers. And that's fair. That's representation matching the voters. But then the state Senate got involved, and 7 Republican senators, and I'm going to say that again, Republican senators voted with Democrats to kill the map. And they voted to keep these DI engineered districts in place, and they voted against the will of their own voters, and they voted to protect Democrat seats in a state that doesn't want Democrat representation. And you got to ask yourself why. Why would a Republican do that? And the answer is almost always the same: power, comfort, relationships. And they got comfortable in their positions, they got cozy with the establishment, and they forgot the people who elected them, that sent them to do their job, not to make friends with the other side. They got arrogant, and they thought they knew better than the voters, and they thought that there would be no consequences. But here's where the story gets good, family, because President Trump took that personally, and he took it as betrayal, as the betrayal it was, okay? So as you see right here in the article from BBC Network, it says Indiana Republicans defied Trump to reject new voting map, right? And then when you look at it, it says Indiana Republicans have defied intense pressure from President Trump by rejecting his demands that they pass a voting map meant to favor their party in next year's midterm elections. And one of the most conservative states in the U.S., 21 Republicans in the Senate joined all 10 Democrats to torpedo the redistricting plan by a vote of 31-19. And the new map passed the House last week, and if it had cleared, the legislative Republicans could have flipped the only 2 Democratic-held congressional seats in the state. Trump's call for Republican state leaders to redraw maps and help the party keep its congressional majority in Washington next year has triggered gerrymandering battles nationwide. And Republican-led Texas and Democratic-led California, two of the country's largest states, have led the change. Other states where redistricting efforts had been initiated or passed included Utah, Ohio, New Hampshire, Missouri, Illinois. Republican State Senator Spencer Deary said ahead of Thursday's vote, and I quote, "My opposition to mid-cycle gerrymandering is not in contrast to my conservative principles. My opposition is driven by them. As long as I have breath, I will use my voice to resist the federal government that attempts to bully, direct, and control this state or any state. Giving the federal government more power is not conservative." All right. So this is Donald Trump, and it says, "It is in my great honor to endorse MAGA warrior and Fountain County GOP chair, Paula Copenhagen, a terrific candidate for Indiana's 23rd State Senate District." All right. So when you look at that and you look at this whole situation, and he said, "Okay, you want to play these games with the people who elected you? Let's see how that works out for you." And Trump didn't just tweet about it and move on. He got involved. He put money behind it. He endorsed challengers for 7 of those 8 seats. He made it clear if you vote against the people who put you in office, there will be consequences. And family, that's the kind of leadership we don't see enough of. Too many Republicans talk tough and then fold. Trump actually followed through. So the primaries came, and one of those 7 rhinos who had voted against redistricting, 5 of them lost immediately, just straight up lost their primaries. Couldn't survive the voters, couldn't survive the accountability. And that's 5 politicians who thought they were safe. They thought they could betray their constituents and get away with it. And the people said, "Nah, we remember, we were watching, and you're done." But 2 of them survived. 2 of them managed to hold on. One of them was a guy named Spencer Deary. And I want you to understand who this man is, because Deary was one of the most vocal opponents of the new map. He was one of the leaders of the effort to kill redistricting. He stood up on the Senate floor and voted with Democrats to block the will of the people. And after the primary, when 5 of his co-conspirators got sent packing, Deary looked around and thought he had survived, and he thought he beat the odds, and he won by 3 votes, okay? As you can see on the screen, it says 3 votes. 3, that's it. That's all that separated him from the political graveyard. He probably thought he was untouchable. He probably thought the MAGA movement couldn't reach him. He probably thought he was smarter than the voters, slicker than the system. But here's what Deary and people like him don't understand. When you betray the people who elected you, when you vote against the interests of your own district, when you side with Democrats against the voters who sent you there, that debt comes due eventually. It might not come the next day. It might not come the next week, but it comes. And for Deary, it came in the form of a recount. So this is the recount as it reads, as you guys can see on the screen. Recount upends election result for Indiana Senate District 23. Paula Copenhaver beats incumbent Deary, right? And this is August 10th, 2026. And as it says, a new winner has been named in a very close race for Indiana Senate District 23. The Indiana Recount Commission met Monday to consider the contested votes, and President Trump-backed candidate Paula Copenhaver came out ahead. The race between Copenhaver and Senator Spencer Deary initially came down to just 3 votes in Deary's favor. But on Monday, the Indiana Recount Commission threw out a number of ballots that instead put Copenhaver 3 votes ahead of Deary. My reaction is, "I'm ready for the general," Copenhaver told reporters after the meeting. Deary's attorney, Samantha DeWester, said she's already preparing an appeal of the decision. "This is unprecedented. Ballots don't get tossed for signature, missing from a clerk." DeWester said it's now getting to set the tone going forward for people that are losers of elections that want to overturn them on technicality stuff. In a statement, Deary said the election commission was undermining the will of the voters. This was not a meeting intended to find fairness. It was designed to find votes, he wrote. "We are confident Indiana's appellate courts will restore the vote totals that have been counted and recounted and reaffirm me as the choice voters made." Deary was one of the Indiana Republicans who voted against President Trump's push to redraw congressional maps to favor the party nationally. Trump launched primary campaigns against those Republicans who opposed them. That push was mostly successful for the president, with only one incumbent Republican winning outright. The left Senate District 23, where Copenhaver quickly moved for a recount. Monday's meeting started with recount director Evan Norris walking through ballot disputes in each of the counties that make up District 23, with both sides contesting a number of ballots. Copenhaver's attorney, William Bach, argued, right? Many of the absentee ballots didn't have the correct circuit court seal or signature, and that absentee ballots were more susceptible to fraud. Bach argued that because the election was one of the closest in Indiana's history, the commission had a duty to hold ballots to the highest standard. I don't want to be here until December 31st, said Recount Commissioner Michael Clater, as Bach continued to go through ballots. Originally, hundreds of ballots were going to be reconsidered. And like I said, and for Derry, it came in the form of recount. You see, his opponent, Paula Copenhaver, the Trump-endorsed challenger, didn't just accept the loss and go home. She challenged it. She said, something's not right here, and we need to look at these ballots. And she was right, because they did the recount. When they actually looked at the ballots carefully, they found 10 ballots that should have not been counted. 8 of them were for Derry, 2 of them were for Copenhaver, and these were absentee ballots that didn't have the proper signatures. They didn't have the required circuit court seals, and they didn't meet the legal standard. The Indiana Recount Commission made the right call and they threw them out. And that's a net swing of 6 votes in an election decided by 3. And just like that, the guy who thought he escaped the firing squad is back on the crosshairs. Just like that, the guy who thought he was safe is now down by 3 votes. Poetic justice, family. That's what this is. Now, Derry is crying foul, of course, because he's saying this sets a bad precedent. He's saying ballots shouldn't be thrown out for technicalities. He's saying voter intent should matter. And to be fair, I can understand why his voters would say that. I can understand why would they feel their votes got taken away. But here's the thing: rules matter, laws matter, and we can't have one set of rules for Republicans and another set for Democrats, and we can't have one standard for people who we like and another for people we don't. And the law says absentee ballots need proper signatures and seals. And if those requirements are met, the ballot is not valid, period. That's not a technicality. That's election integrity. Because if we start saying, hey, well, we know what they meant every time there's a procedural error and there's no standard at all, then every election becomes a debate about what the voters really intended instead of what the ballots actually show. And that's a slippery slope, and Derry knows it. The hypocrisy is that when these same rules benefit Republicans, you don't hear him complain. It's only when the shoe is on the other foot that suddenly the rules are unfair. Now, here's the bigger picture, family. This is where I really want you to pay attention. This isn't just about one state Senate seat in Indiana. This is about a war for the future of the House of Representatives. And let me explain how this connects. Right now, Indiana has 7 Republican congressmen and 2 Democrats in a state where Trump won by double digits. Where the state legislature is supermajority Republican, that split does not reflect the voters. Those 2 Democrat seats exist because the old maps were drawn under those DEI requirements. DEI requirements. And I mentioned earlier, they were engineered to elect Democrats in a Republican state. That's not fair. That's not representation. That's manipulation. So the new map the House passed would have made Indiana a 9-0 Republican delegation, and that will finally reflect how the state actually votes. But then the state Senate killed it, and now with Derry potentially being removed and replaced by a pro-redistricting Republican, the map changes. The state Senate President Rod Bray, the state Senate President Rod Bray, who also opposed the map, has already announced he's stepping down. And he saw the writing on the wall. He saw what happened to his colleagues. He decided to get out before he got thrown out. So now you got a state Senate that could have a fundamentally different voting block when the next session starts. And if Copenhaver wins the general election, which almost certainly will in a district that is heavily Republican, then you have 6 out of 7 anti-redistricting Republicans replaced by pro-redistricting Republicans, 6 out of 7, and that changes everything. And that is where the timeline matters. If the new state Senate can pass a redistricting map before the 2028 election cycle, Indiana could go from a 7-2 Republican delegation to a 9-0 Republican delegation. And that's 2 more seats in Congress, 2 more votes for conservative policies, 2 more votes to stop the Democrat agenda, and 2 more votes that could be the difference between a House majority and a House minority. And it all came down to 3 votes in a recount. 3 votes. Let that sink in. So the entire balance of power in Indiana, potentially the balance of the power in House of Representatives, came down to 3 people who showed up and voted for a candidate who respected their values. And that's why every vote matters, and that's why every election matters. That's why you can never sit out and never stay home, never say my vote doesn't count, because sometimes 3 votes is all it takes to change the direction of a state. And sometimes 3 votes is all it takes to change the direction of a country. Now, I want to zoom out even further because this story teaches us something bigger than Indiana politics. This story teaches us about accountability. And that's a lesson that applies everywhere, not just in politics, but in your job, in your community, in your family. And when people trust you to do something and you do the opposite, there are consequences. That's not mean. That's not unfair. That's life. You betray the trust of the people who put you in position of authority. You can't be surprised when that authority gets taken away. And too often in politics, we see the opposite. We see people who mess up, who break promises, who vote against their constituents, and nothing happens. They get reelected, they get promoted, and they get rewarded for bad behavior. But that's changing, and the voters are waking up and they're paying attention. And they're remembering, and Donald Trump has been at the center of the movement, holding Republicans accountable and reminding them who they work for, and it's working. And you see it in Indiana, you see it in states across the country. The days of RINOs thinking they can safely ignore their base are coming to an end. And think about what this means for the Democratic Party too. While Republicans are purging the weak links and getting unified around a common agenda, the Democrats are going in the opposite direction. They're doubling down on unpopular positions. They're protecting their most extreme members, and they're pushing policies that the majority of Americans don't want. And they're doing it while their party shrinks and their coalition fractures, and that's a losing strategy. But I'm not here to tell you what to think about the other side. I'm here to tell you what's actually happening and why it matters. And here's what's happening, family. A guy named Spencer Deary thought he was safe. He thought he could vote against the president, vote against his own voters, vote with Democrats to block a fair map and still keep his job. And he was wrong. And 6 out of his colleagues learned the same lesson the hard way. They learned that when you bite the hand that feeds you, eventually the hand bite back. And they learned that voters have long memories, and they learned that the age of accountability is here, and that's a good thing, and that's how democracy is supposed to work. You represent the people, or you get replaced by someone who will, and it's that simple. Now, Deary's team says they're going to appeal. They're going to take it to the courts. They're going to say the Recount Commission made a mistake, and they say they might be right about the appeal. I'm not a judge. I'm not going to predict what a court would do. But what I know is this: the Recount Commission made a decision based on the law as written, and they looked at the ballots and that didn't meet the legal requirements, and they threw them out. And that's the right call. And if the courts overturn it, then we'll deal with it when it happens. But for right now, in the moment, the good guys won. The people who stood with President Trump, who stood for fair maps, who stood with the voters, they won, and that's worth celebrating. And before I get to the final part, I want to take a step back and ask you something. When you look at what happened here, what do you see? Do you see a political game? Do you see a technicality? Or do you see accountability in action? Because from my perspective, this is something bigger than Indiana. This is about the principle that when you're given a responsibility, you either fulfill it or you get replaced. And that's not a Republican idea or a Democrat idea. That's a human idea, and that's common sense. That's how any organization, a business, a sports team, a family operates when it functions properly. And for too long, politics have been an exception. For too long, politicians have been able to do whatever they want and face no consequences. And that's changing. And stories like this, when a 3-vote margin gets overturned because a Trump-backed challenger refused to accept a corrupt outcome, that's proof that the change is real. So let me close out with this, something that applies to all of us, whether you're spiritual or not, because I always like to give you something to think about after the politics is done. You see, family, in this life, actions have consequences. That's not a threat. That's not a punishment. That's agriculture. Whatever you plant, that's what grows. When you plant corn, you get corn. You plant betrayal, you get consequences. You plant loyalty, you get trust. You plant hard work, you get results. And for the politicians like Spencer Deary, they planted a vote against the people who trusted them, and now they're harvesting a recount loss. And it's not complicated, it's cause and effect. And for those who are spiritual, I want to leave you with Proverbs chapter 29, verse 1. And it says, whoever remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. Think about that for a second. Stiff-necked means stubborn. It means refusing to listen. It means getting warned over and over again and still doing what you want to do anyway. And Deary was warned. Every single one of those 7 Republican senators was warned. And they saw five of their colleagues lose their seats. They saw the writing on the wall. But Deary stayed stiff-necked. He thought he was the exception. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. And the Bible says when you do that, when you stay stubborn in the face of correction, eventually you get broken suddenly. There's no remedy, no do-over, no appeal to heaven, just consequences. And that's a spiritual principle, but it works in the natural world too. Pride comes before the fall, and when the fall comes, it's sudden. And like I say, for those who are not spiritual, when people warn you, listen. When you see others making the same mistake you're about to make, pay attention. The universe has a way of leveling things out. The same energy you put out into the world eventually circles back to you. You can't cheat the game forever. You can't betray trust forever, and you can't ignore warnings forever. At some point, the bill comes due, and when it does, you want to be on the right side of the ledger. So whatever you're doing today at your job, your relationships, your community, do the right thing, even when nobody's watching. That's the true test, because it'll tell you who you are. Because for those who are watching and you're only doing the right thing, then this becomes performative and not really truthful in who you are and being authentic, because somebody's always watching, just to let you know as well. And the reward for doing right might not come tomorrow, but it comes, just like the consequences for doing wrong eventually catch up. Ask Spencer Deary. He learned the lesson the hard way, family. All right, that's what I got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.